Okay, before I go anywhere, I'll admit I have no idea how this is going to land. Depending on who is watching it, might just get my channel nuked in the cradle, or maybe it'll just sputter and die a disgraceful death. But regardless, I feel it must be done, for completion's sake, if nothing else. So let's do this. Herein I shall illustrate a theory, or rather a hypothesis to be more scientifically accurate, that's been stewing in the back of my mind for something like 10 years now. Something akin to Jean Piaget's theory of developmental psychology, i.e. one of the foundational theories upon which a large portion of our modern understanding of the human mind is based. Only in this case it is for life, the universe, and everything as a whole. Insert Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy joke here. To be clear, this is my own derivative thesis based on my own personal observations, musings, and readings of various scientific and philosophical works over the years. Further, it is nested in the broader observation that all aspects and facets of the cosmos are fractally similar, if not perfectly symmetrical to one another. Much like how the arms of a snowflake mimic the design of the core node, so do the lower orders, facets, and scales of the universe mirror the look and design pattern of the whole. Basically, I am saying that the universe is not only that lazy kid who copies his friend's math homework and just changes the work slightly, but also that it transposed those answers straight onto their science homework because it thinks the teacher's a moron. Considering that, in this analogy, we, that is the human race, are that brain-dead science teacher, I suppose we're not really in a position to talk shit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The simplest actual example of this format I can think of being the wave function. In quantum mechanics, particles are said to exist in a superordinate limbo state called a superposition until interaction with another particle's quantum probability field cancels out and whittles down their potential states into a contiguous body, which we call an atom. Just as a few seemingly random particles ordered into a chain produces a molecule, a cluster of disorderly microorganisms conglomerated by random circumstantial motions spawned the first thing we primitive monkeys recognize as life. The same transformative pattern, I believe, holds true for people. As above, so below, as the alchemists say. If a single cell can carry in itself an iconic representation of the associated body, what's to say a single human can't likewise carry the broader conditional pattern of the body's social they're a part of? My personal headcanon, as it were, is that the whole of human civilization, right from the embryonic Stone Age all the way up to the burgeoning adolescence here at the dawn of the Information Age, mirrors the developmental cycle of the individual human. For the sake of illustration, I'll attempt to draw as near a parallel as I can between the 5 stages of an individual human's psychological development, which, for clarity, I'll go forward calling the personal journey, to the 5 stages of civilizational development, which I'll call the Great Journey. Yes, the irony is known and very much intentional, but please note that it's not a perfect analogy. As stated, the Song of Songs never repeats, it rhymes. And it's that general melody I'm more interested in, not so much the individual notes or lyrics. In simpler terms, I'm painting a picture, not taking a photo. Okay? Clear? Good. Let's get started. The 5 stages of the personal journey from birth to death are as follows: infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, seniority. While entire libraries could be and have been dedicated to each of these, for our purposes we'll be classifying them solely by their transitional ends, i.e. their start and end points, which we'll call gates to keep true with the whole journey theme. In an individual, the first gate is unlocked at birth, although some will argue it starts at conception. With humanity at large, it could similarly be argued that we entered stage 1 either when our genus first emerged on the evolutionary scene or when we first attained sentience. As far as I'm concerned, we really passed the point of no return the first time one of us looked up at the sky and thought, "Who put that there?" Either way, our collective gate 2 was passed by when we discovered how to bend the earth and its creatures to our benefit. Like our constituent microcosms, we passed through trials, eras of discovery and advancement. In the world, the eras of stone, bronze, and iron. In the mind, periods of object, of symbol, and of person. In our personal journeys, meanwhile, Gate 2 is marked psychologically by the revelations that we are our own independent beings. not merely an extension of our parents, and that our world, which up until now has consisted of 6 flat plains and the handful of creatures that feed and coddle and scold us sometimes for seemingly any or no reason whatsoever, and the universe aren't actually one and the same. Gate 3 historically is bulwarked by what I'm going to call the Explorer Age, beginning around the Western Renaissance, though not at all exclusive to it, encapsulating the explosion of revolutionary thought and vision and exploration, critical to the development of a people as well as an individual. It is in this age when unrepentant critical examination of all that has hitherto been held as sacred is not only lauded as avant-garde, but a key to the greater task of real journey progress, and ending with the dawn of the Industrial Age, also known as the Steam Age, or as I'm going to go on calling it, the Steel Age. Just so, our personal third gate is when we recognize that our parents aren't nearly as infallible, omnipotent, or omniscient as we had so far fooled ourselves into believing. In both cases, there can be seen a dissolution of dependence between the pilgrims, that is, the children and the body populace, and the overlords, i.e. the parents and the established orators of societal narratives, churches, kings, etc., as well as a strong disillusion with, and eventually contempt for, arbitrary authority, which leads us nicely into Gate 4, our tumultuous present, the birth of the Information Age. So where exactly am I going with this? Well, do you remember my quick nod to alchemy near the beginning? If not, I'm sure you definitely noticed the shape in the video's thumbnail. That is the alchemic symbol for antimony. In ancient lore, it represented both the penultimate stage in the purification process of the lapis, the material of the philosopher's stone, and the final stage in converting lead into gold. A pared-down variant of this symbol later appeared in quantum field equations representing wave functions specifically, or uncertainty more broadly. Not, I believe, by accident. And the reason it also appears in my YouTube banner is that it's also sometimes referred to as the Grey Wolf, which fits my channel theme. Yes, I am that basic. On the grand scale, the fourth gate opens with the decentralized and thus uncensored and unscripted dissemination of information. Just as the second gate coincided with the advent of the printing press, so too does our next step as a species co-sign the charter with digitization. Down on the personal scale, the fourth gate entails 4 revelations, each one more painful than the last. Particularly noteworthy here is that nobody passes through this gate unscathed, and very few actually fully pass through it at all. Revelation 1 is the extent to which we were blinded, either by our own ignorance, indifference, or by our parents deliberately shielding us from the full ugly truth of things. Revelation 2 is that we are islands, before our lives were ensconced in a blissful hearthfire existence, free of care and full of hope. Now we face the brunt of the cold, harsh, uncaring universe, completely starved, naked, and alone. Many break on this stage. Just as many a kingdom and empire has fallen to wars about whose imaginary sky figures are real. Many teenagers throw themselves from bridges or straddle the downside of a rope upon realizing that the happy nothings they were promised were always exactly that. Revelation 3 is that we are mortal. While the concept of death is not news to a well-developed child of 12 or 13, it's never fully realized the weight and pressure this adds to their tenuous thread of their finite life until they are faced with the inexorable dread of looming responsibility, the demands of a world uninhabitable by fairies and dreams, the place where the glass panel of reason meets with the heavy stone of truth. Revelation 4 is that the world, and by close extension everyone else in it, has no vested interest in us, no matter how much they might claim or even genuinely believe otherwise. Basically, it breaks down this way. People value what benefits them. People want what they value. People believe whatever they feel they have to in order to justify their wants. People then prioritize and focus on those facts which supports their beliefs. Hence, our biases. Adolescence in individual lives is typically a baptism of fire. All the things we were shielded from suddenly jump out to scare us, and we are forced to make a choice. To stand, to walk, to run, or to hide. On top of that, we looked down the loaded barrel of definite hardship while holding only a slip of unmarked paper that once we thought had been a map to paradise. What should we do now? Where are we supposed to go? Likewise, we all as a collective have to reckon with the fact that all that has been will come again. What will be will go to ruin, and what is will last only so far as the paper barge of memory can ferry it. What is a life if not a series of paths not taken? What is there to see and hear and do when all is as it has always ever been or ever will be? With nothing new under the sun, what use is there for the light? If you thought any of this was what I meant by I'd be painting a target on myself, then you were sorely mistaken. Here's where we get to the really sensitive bit. The YouTube cramming its boot so far up my ass, I can taste leather bit. For several years now, I've studied and meditated on the scientific and philosophical underpinnings of the American political and social divisions, and have come to several interesting conclusions. 4, to be precise. 1, that there are in fact 3 points on our political compass, not 2, and their lines are drawn between those who value either A, freedom, them being the individualists, B, safety, the absolutists, or C, equality, the communists. 2, the vector any individual aligns with depends entirely on their temperament, as it determines their core value structure. Those who are industrious value security. Those who are creative value freedom. Those who are neither industrious nor creative value equality. In case you can't already spot my bias from Neptune, I lean towards the anarchistic end of the spectrum. 3. There exists a fundamental desire in all humans to perfect. But this is a fantasy, one which all religions and ideologies across time have thrived on selling us. That if we only believe X, Y, and Z, or pray to X or Y deity, all of our problems will be solved. We can never solve all our problems. It's a logical paradox. There are no perfect solutions, just as there are no intrinsically good or bad choices. There are only actions and consequences. The best we can do is choose which set of consequences we're willing to accept and act accordingly. 4. The only one of the 3 branches listed above that truly believes in the unsaleable, inherent value of an individual are the communists. I know this because the other 2 groups, the libertarians and conservatives, often at the slightest possible provocation will wildly proclaim the virtues of meritocracy and capitalism, both of which attribute worth to an individual solely on the basis of their productivity, not by the content of their characters, as MLK famously dreamed. Which makes it particularly ironic to me that these same people will also so liberally point to Dr. King as evidence for their side's inherent virtue. That the irony of this is lost on them is unfortunate, but unsurprising, as the vast proportion of people's beliefs are not solely theirs, but handed down from their family and/or society, and it just never occurs to most of us to question them. Now, you're probably asking just what the hell any of this has to do with my original premise. Well, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I believed all sorts of strange, screwy, contradictory things that I now realize can't possibly be true. Everyone knows that teens rebel. Everyone knows that the world changes. What amazes me is that nobody ever seems to connect those 2 dots. The thing about contradictions is that they only reveal themselves when you try to act them out. The point of all of this is, rounding back on the potential symbolism again, I originally drafted this whole thesis back when I was about 16, and I've more or less sat on it for the last 10 years, editing and revisiting it every so often. And the more I've learned, the more I've lived, the more I've seen and heard and done, the more fully I came to appreciate what I think many of us instinctively understood growing up, but just never had the words to express. That in a world brimming with contradictions, motives, and contradictory motives, there are no adults, just bigger children with bigger pocketbooks and bigger egos. But now all that's changing before our eyes. The old world is breaking down, as it always does. The old ways don't work anymore. We can't live in our safe little havens of ignorance forever. In the age of creativity and science, we cannot afford to be ignorant or passive. As the Apostle Paul wrote, "When I was a child, I thought and reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I had to put away childish things." This is why objectivity and facts matter, not feelings, not virtues, not even beliefs. In the words of George Orwell, after 20 nobody cares if you're nice or not. And this is also why children shouldn't vote. We moved away from kings because we realized they were only human. We moved away from religion because we realized magic isn't real. In ancient Greece, it was taken as fact that sons would one day come into strength and depose their tyrannical fathers. We all have to leave home and become our own beings. Anything less is to perish. The measure of any belief is how well we can live by it, and right now many of us are struggling to square that circle. Bodies don't last long on a diet of faith and honor. A business cannot operate solely on principle. It needs capital. The world is finite. Our needs and desires are infinite. We are a species of paradoxes, oxymorons, and contradictions. Trying to make coherent sense of it all is like trying to drink the ocean. That is why the first of the 5 keys to the 5th gate is hang the sense of things. Just go along and try to keep yourself occupied. The second, and arguably most important, is the abiding awareness of endings. Knowing that what is will never last. Fire fades, water evaporates, earth scatters, and wind dies. From dust to dust, ashes to ashes. What has been shall be again. What will be done is what has been done. There is nothing new under the sun, and one day the sun's fire will perish too. And so to cherish what is now for what it is, not for what it may bring. For when everything is a memory, all is lost. And when everything's a future prize, life's just an empty game. Third is to know reality from fiction. It often amazes me, even though it really shouldn't by this point, how many grown-ass adults I meet who tell me with a totally straight face how their storybook says the world will end in some fiery apocalypse, some ultimate collision, an epic battle wherein evil will be permanently vanquished. That's a fairy tale. A fantasy meant to coddle and corral the weak. Children believe in happily ever after. Adults know that forever is the dark abyss around humanity's flickering firelight. Fourth is recognizing the difference between potential and probable. What can be versus what will most likely be, knowing that statistically you are average. Fifth and finally is the reconcilement with pain and intolerance, knowing that suffering is just another fact of life. To embody this is to see and hear all and to not fear. To not fear is to embrace life for what it is, not to confuse it for a failed dream. Piece of hard advice, anyone trying to sell you a dream is trying to put you to sleep. To sum up my point in a line, I believe we are at a crossroads, we as in the whole of humanity. For each of us, unlocking our 5th personal gate is about finding and embracing our core identity. As Jordan Peterson says, choose your damn sacrifice before it gets chosen for you. We have to decide, each of us, for one and for all, just who we're going to be. What face are we going to show the rest of the cosmos? Are we going to fall for the trap of fantasy? Or are we going to toss off our childish cloaks, lace up our boots, and set ourselves on an adventure? Not one for the ages, but for ourselves. Personally. Tales we tell are ones that have not been lived. We live in the most prosperous era mankind's ever known. You have the tools. You have the power. Now, choose.